All right. For the Matric class of 2022, this weekend marks the eve of their Matric examinations that start on Monday. Then more than 920,000 students are expected to write the National Senior Certificate examination this year. Counselling psychologist Sumari Nel says it is normal for students and parents to feel a heightened sense of anxiety around this time. Nel is encouraging parents and guardians to be mindful of their children's mental health during this time. We are now joined via Zoom by Elizabeth Biney. She's a researcher at Equal Education to weigh in on Matric exams that are set to begin this Monday on the 31st of October. Elizabeth, a very good afternoon to you, and thanks very much for joining us here on SABC News, ma'am.
Afternoon. Thanks for having us.
You're most welcome. Let's start here. I mean, a lot has been said about the issue of load shedding. That's been quite topical ahead of these exams, and we've in fact heard from certain sectors asking that matriculants be exempt from load shedding during this period. Are you part of those supporting these particular calls? I mean, we do know that matriculants would have to be studying, sometimes even in the evenings. Surely this would be the wrong time to be implementing load shedding.
Yes, of course, if we are serious about quality and equal education as an organization, of course, we have to be mindful of this situation. And we are a little bit concerned about the conditions in which this cohort of matrics are going to write. Mind you, the electricity or load shedding discussions we are having is just a small part of a larger crisis in the sector that places certain learners at a disadvantage and obviously shapes their life course indefinitely. So while matric learners are to be exempted, I mean, the Department of Basic Education should have foreseen this way before the exam itself. It's not that we are looking at the exam specifically, which tends to be the department's approach. It always tries to address problems at the tail end of it and not be proactive in making sure that the issue doesn't arise in itself. But ESCOM needs to obviously look at schools as one of those sectors that maybe potentially need to be exempted, like hospitals, because learners are at a disadvantage even if they have electricity, right? So we are talking about a situation where a significant proportion of our learners of our schools don't have reliable supply of electricity. And in the event that they do or they get, we still have the added stress of load shedding. So the situation that we are talking about is not just about ESCOM's failure to obviously provide energy. We are talking about an infrastructure crisis within the basic education sector itself that is having reverberating effect and eventually climaxes during matric exams, because that is the pinnacle of the education, the sector's success.
Yeah, while we're talking about issues that affect the matriculants, I mean, what's been your observation in particular when it comes to preparations of these exams from the beginning of the year? I mean, are learners fully equipped? Let's not forget that these are also learners who would have been really, leading up to matric, feeling the full effects of COVID-19 lockdowns and having to have probably when they were in grade 8 and moving on to, let's say, grade 9, 10, having to really battle to get ready for the coming matric year.
So, yes, you're right in that we mustn't forget that this cohort of matric learners were probably the hardest hit by the COVID pandemic, the resultant lockdowns, the rotational school attendance, because they were in grade 10 when all these issues started, right? So they have had a lot more learning losses than, say, the previous cohort or the cohort before that. So in terms of whether or not they are prepared, we need to understand also that learning is not linear, in that what you learn today, you remember tomorrow. It's a very complex dynamic in that you might have to re-look at it, relearn certain things for you to be able to grasp it. So what unfortunately, what they lost in their grade 10 year might be following them into this exam, because we are not sure how effective the catch-up programs that the different education departments have been obviously workshopping and selling to us, how effective they have been. We can only see the result of that effectiveness of that those catch-up plans at the end, which is when the results come through. But at that stage, it will be too late, because that is when these learners are supposed to be exiting the system, and maybe there's not much that we can do to rescue them. So it is very important that we address some of these critical issues at the very beginning, and not look at the exam as the be it and end it all of the sector's success. So foundational learning is equally important, and obviously trying to make up some of the losses that the pandemic obviously sort of worsened, so that we make sure that learners are on track to obviously succeed in the sector and move on to higher education and be employable in the future.
All right, thanks very much to you, Elizabeth. Let's leave it there. Elizabeth Biney, education researcher at Equal Education, to weighing in, of course, on the Matric exams that are set to begin on earnest this Monday, the 31st of October.